Okay, so now we made it to the next section where we're going to now talk about receiving functions as arguments. Last section was about passing them. Now we're going to learn about receiving them. We're going to have two videos for this section as well because I want to kind of point out a few things as we play around with the code so it can make sure you better understand how it works and that you follow the process and try to eliminate some of the frustration. This whole exercises that we do is to help build your confidence because that's what it's all about. The more we can build your confidence, the more you'll be able to overcome the imposter syndrome because we all go through it. But it's all about lack of confidence. That's why we deal with the imposter syndrome. When we have good, strong confidence, we don't deal with it as much. But if you're new to this channel, the curriculum is free. You can follow along. The link is in the description. So without further ado, let's get into the curriculum. Here we go. Receiving functions as arguments. The previous section illustrates how a function can be passed to another function as an argument. This section takes the opposite perspective to write functions that can take other functions as arguments. Here we have what we call a generic input validator. Our first example will be a generic input validator. It takes the user for some input. It asks the user for some input using the prompt parameter for the text of the question. A second parameter receives a function that does the actual work of validating the input. Here's the code. Notice here we're using const as the keyword. We have the input that we're familiar with. We're declaring it, and we are doing what initializing the required function that's going to find our readline sync, which is a module. Here we have a keyword function, and we have the name of the function as get valid input, and we're passing it to parameters. How do I know they're parameters? Because we're defining it with the keyword function. When we invoke it, we won't have the keyword function, and we'll pass it the arguments. Inside of the block or the body of the function, we've created another variable called user input. Now you should be familiar with this because we're going to use the input object and we're going to use the question method. There's that dot. I know that this is a method because of the parentheses. But notice we're making this dynamic because all we're doing is passing the parameter prompt. We're not passing in a string or anything. We're making this dynamic. We're not hard coding anything. And then we're going to have a check. This is what this while loop is doing. It's checking to make sure that the input is valid. We're using a predicate name, meaning it's a Boolean, and we're going to pass it the user input. Well, the user input is the variable that is storing the information that we asked for the user to input. And now what it's doing is, if this is not valid, if it's not true, that means we want you to run this code because it starts off as true on the outside, the input. But if it's not the information that we want, that means it's false. And if that means this is false, which means it's true because it's inside these parentheses, so it has to be true in order for this block of code to execute. If that means the information that we put into it, I know this is going to get confusing, so you got to play around with this. So if this is true, which is supposed to be opposite of whatever this input is that I'm asking, if I'm asking for something to be of true, and this is not true, or if it's false, then it's going to change this to true. Or if I'm asking for a positive number and I put a negative number, then this is going to be true. And then this is going to run, and it's going to keep running until I make it true, or that I give it what I'm asking for. If the user is giving me the input I'm asking for. And then remember, I got to return it. I'm going to return the user input, which is this right here that has the information in it, if this is working the way I want it to work. And remember, when your function hits the return, now the function is now destroyed. It's done. It's complete. And we always want to put this return on right before the closing bracket. Now notice here I have another helper function to help me to be able to find out if what I'm looking for is true. If I'm prompting the user to enter an even number, and it's going to run this function next. So I have the string, and then I'm going to run a function because my prompt is going to be a string. And then my is even is going to be the function that I created here. And this is my results. Now, when we call get valid input on line 22, we pass it the string, enter an even number. That's my argument now. This is my actual invoking the function. These are the arguments. I need two of them. I need one to be a string, and I need the other one to be the function that I created. And this is an anonymous function that's stored in a variable. Now, which gets assigned to the prompt parameter. Notice that we also pass in the function is even with no arguments. There's no argument right now because we're passing it as in, but we're not giving it an argument. We're just actually invoking the actual function. This gets assigned to the isValid parameter. The function getValid input handles the work of interacting with the user while allowing the validation logic to be customized. This separates the different concerns of validation and user interaction, sticking to the idea that a function should do only one thing. It also enables more reusable code. If we need to get different input from the user, we can simply call getValid input with a different argument. Now here's an example of another piece of code. This validate input. This example uses the same getValidate input. We're using the same function. We're reusing the function to find a bug with a different prompt. And validator function. In this case, we check that a potential password has at least 8 characters. This is something that you may actually write in your code. It's the validator password. But we have third-party software to help us do this as well. But it's good to understand how to work it from the high level without using any help from any method or using any third-party library. But go over this code line by line to understand it. And this is the output. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try this getValid input. We're going to go to the file, and I'm going to show you in VS Code. So I'm going to open up VS Code. Okay, so here's my VS Code. And I'm inside the getValid input. And then I have the receive function argument here. So if I go down my tree and I'm inside of more on functions, I'm going to open up the chapter examples, and then I'm going to open up receive function arguments, and then here it is that I want, getValid input. That's the file that I want. Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to run this. So I'm going to go node and the file name, which is getValid, and I can tab it to finish it for me. I'm going to hit run. Oh, okay, wait a minute now. I have a problem. What does it say? Can I find module read line sync? Now I did this on purpose because I want to make sure if you're struggling with this, you know how to read the error. The error message tells you what's wrong. And what is wrong is the fact that I need my node modules here. So I'm in receive function argument, and I actually have the node module right there. So it says it can't find it. So I'm going to do an npm install. But first, I had installed this node module. I'm going to delete this real quick. I need to delete it because I don't need it. So I'm going to remove it first. So I removed it out of my receive function argument. I need to be in this folder in order for me to run this npm install. Oh. So I'm going to run it. And it's just installed it again. So there's my node module right there. So now when I go and run it, I know it's working because now I'm not getting the error, but it's not doing what I want it to do. So why is that? Let's look at the code. So I have the get valid input right here. So what haven't I done? I haven't called it yet. So let's invoke the function. So I'm going to invoke the function, get valid input. And so I need to pass it two arguments. The first one is what the prompt is going to be. Enter an even number. And then I got to separate with a comma. And I need that function that I haven't created yet. So I need that helper function. So I'm going to call it is even, right? And so I need to go ahead and create that function. So right above it, I'm going to create the function. So I'm going to give it, I'm going to make it an anonymous function. So I'm going to say let is even. I have to assign it the function. So it's an anonymous function. And then I'm going to pass a parameter called in. So I got to give it the body. So what am I trying to do with this? I need to check that if that is in. So I can do a couple of things here. I can do a conditional or I can just return it. So I can just say return. What am I returning? Remember, it was a number. I need the number function. I need to convert this because when I enter it in, it's going to be a string, but I want it to actually be a number. And then I want to check the remainder modulus because I want to make sure it's even. And the best way to do that is using the modulus right here. So it has to go in evenly too to make it equal to 0. So if there's a remainder left over, then I know that it's going to be an odd number. So let me save that. Let me come down here. I'm using my up key arrow. So it's asking me to enter a number. So I'm going to enter in 4 and then I'm going to do it. Okay. Now how come it didn't print out 4 for me? What do I need to do? I need to put it inside of a console.log so it can print it to the console. I just need it to print. So I'm going to wrap that in a console.log. I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to run it again. Remember node and the file name. I'm going to enter in 4. There it is. It returned my 4 for me. So now I know it's working. But now let me do it again because I need to check if it's working, if I put in an odd number that I want that while loop to run. So I'm going to hit enter. Try again. Let me do 9. It's not try again. It's looking for an even number. Let me try 10. It's working. Now, one of the things you want to do, you want to go ahead and do this to do right here. And I want you to go ahead and create the new validator. Play around with the code. Make this what it says. Ensure that the input starts with an A. But also remember, you're going to have to make sure you write the validator that ensures input is a val. So you're going to have to write a little extra code here. So that's the end of this particular video. It was a long video, but it was necessary that I demonstrate how to use VS Code with your examples. So again, the more you do, the more you improve. We're going to finish up this section with Logger.